this man appeared on the political scene back in the 1970s. He was prime minister in the 1970s. Let us not forget, when he was regarded as a part of a new generation of whiz-kid young politicians or technocrats who had emerged under the aegis of de Gaulle and Pompidou. I remember he was caricaturized famously in an early Asterix album as the exemplar of the young thrusting planner. In the book, he was a Roman, but of course in real life he was a planner. He was a great organizer. Entered politics as a Gaullist, whatever that meant or whatever that means, but certainly under the banner of de Gaulle and Pompidou in that succession, and then had this long kind of in-out war, which was really kind of friendly war with President Mitterrand, the socialist, Chirac, the man of the right, and it was a sort of battle in which they both posed as being terribly hostile to the other, but in point of fact, their policies were very, very close. And and part of the sort of great critique of this whole period is that for 30 years, when the two men dominated French politics, not much was done because there was a kind of cosy consensus around the centre. Certainly, Chirac was never a radical right winger at all, and Mitterrand was never, apart from at the very beginning, a radical left winger. And there was a sort of collusion between the two, and of course, they did actually cohabit, as the phrase went, for a time in the 80s when Chirac was prime minister and Mitterrand was president. So the other thing one has to remember about Chirac is that famous Pole. He was the man that, even towards the end of his tenure, he's the man that most French people said they'd quite like to have dinner with. So even when there was a massive rejection of his policies, a general sense that he'd represented a sort of drift, it's certainly in terms of economic and policy inside France, and the decline had taken root under his tenure. He was nonetheless a man who was highly regarded, loved even, for what he seemed to represent. He was a unifier. He was somebody who had his roots in the countryside, who loved quaffing beer and eating tête de veau, calf's head stew or pâté. He was a bit Catholic, but not too much. He was certainly not too right-wing. He was bourgeois, but not too much. He was able to talk to farmers. The farmers loved him. He was someone who represented France, an emblem of France that people could identify with. Something which I would say since his departure, and many would say that since he's gone, maybe politics has taken a turn for the better because there are more dynamic politicians around. But since then, there hasn't been that kind of unifying character at the top of French politics.